The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, ACPA. We are glad you're joining us for our final mid-level Community of Practice webinar for the 2015-2016 academic year. This webinar is called Advanced Mechanics of Supervision for Mid-Level Practitioners. My name is Kia Kurzman, and I'm a member of the Mid-Level Community of Practice Directorate Board. I will be taking your questions via Twitter, so please use the hashtag MLCOPACPA to ask us your questions. We will also be looking at the Facebook Mid-Level Community of Practice webpage. One of the things our presenters would like to know from you today is something that you would like to get out of this webinar. So please use the hashtag MLCOPACPA on Twitter to let us know what you would like to achieve as far as a learning outcome goes for your participation today. I will return at the end of the webinar to do a few announcements on behalf of the Mid-Level Community of Practice. So stay tuned for that because we have some exciting things in the future. And now I would like to introduce Deborah Griffith, who is the Director of the Educational Opportunity Program at San Jose State University and the owner of Griffith Coaching and Consulting.
Welcome, everyone. The other co-presenter for us today is Dr. Tom Seeger. We're going to share a little bit why we came to wanting to even put on this webinar for you. So I'll start with turning it over to Tom. So, hi, Tom.
Hi, Deb. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. So I came to this topic because I was simply overwhelmed. I found myself as a senior student affairs officer supervising a large staff and feeling like I didn't have the skill sets, strategy, tactics I needed to be successful as a supervisor. And while my staff were incredibly grateful to me, I felt there were a lot of things I needed to learn. And ironically, Deb and I were on a similar journey in finding that we needed some additional skills. That's how I came to the topic. So I currently serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs, and in that role, I supervise 2 AVPs, a Dean of Students, several directors, and I even supervise staff who have a range of experience from as many as 40-plus years of experience in the field to as few as 5 years of experience. And so it was important for me to understand how to best work with that range of experience, how to be a supportive supervisor, but also how to be a supervisor who was helping the staff achieve outcomes. So that's kind of how I came to this.
And so for me, along my journey as a higher ed professional, I had a number of conversations over the years regarding the lack of training related to supervision, the complexities of supervision, and even working with coaching clients and hearing from them that the number one reason for job dissatisfaction is the supervisor. I just got to thinking that my work and my research and some of the things that me and Tom have worked with and done over the years, this would be a great time to develop some training, supervision, and sharing our strategies that we've used along the way after many hard lessons that we've learned through supervision or supervising ourselves. So that is really how we came to wanting to put this on for you today. So I hope that what we shared today is helpful. The purpose for us, can you switch to the purpose slide, please? Thank you. Is an opportunity to enhance supervisory competencies around developing staff, coaching, and inclusive leadership, essential to moving your team forward. So again, we're just going to share some of the many lessons and some of the techniques that we have learned and developed and used to empower our staff individually and as a team. So that is the purpose.
So I just want to take a few moments and cover the learning outcomes. And as Deb and I were putting this together, we realized we didn't have 8 weeks. We literally had 40, 45 minutes. And so we want to focus on both delegation and coaching as both skills that one needs to have as a supervisor to work with employees, help them reach their full potential. And these are skills that we often don't spend a lot of time learning in our grad prep programs, and sometimes we're not even taught those skills, so we have to go out and find those skills. And through developing these skills, we want to enhance our teams, realizing that any work that we need to accomplish within this field and most other fields, it happens through the efforts of many people. It happens through identifying folks' strengths and help them leverage those strengths. And the one word we don't talk about sometimes is this word negative. This word negative. We try to focus on the positive. We don't think about those employees who can be negative and how they impact the team. So we'll address all three of these outcomes and a few other things that we haven't put here on the slide, but we will address this throughout today's webinar.
Great. So let's dive into focusing on individual. So many of us have used or have been using coaching in some type of fashion as a tool from our supervision toolbox for years, but we may have not formally labeled it as coaching. In fact, coaching has been a technique attributed to assisting executives, but the truth is coaching strategies can be applied to assisting staff members on all levels. The goal of a coach is simply to assist one to achieve their outlined goals. So where do we start? When we think about intentionally incorporating coaching into how we supervise our staff, first we need to start by taking the time to get to know more about the employees, such as their strengths, position needs, wants, and goals, as well as barriers that may be impeding them from performance. Confidence of overall happiness in their position, what motivates them, how they contribute to the team and the department, and finally their career aspirations. So first, before we can even do the coaching, we have to understand the full employee. For the last few years, I have been employing a concept called SIPs to dive in. And so what does SIPs stand for? So the C is career goals. The I is inventory of current position. The P is professional development, needs/goals. And the S is the strengths. And so I look at all four of these areas when I'm trying to dive in to get to know a little bit more about my staff. So I begin by understanding each of my employees. This has assisted me in building trust, identifying each of their strengths, understanding what motivates them, as well as how to motivate them, areas where they need support and coaching, such as professional development needs, project management, program management, supervision, and career advancement. So SIPS is basically a professional development worksheet that I give all my employees, and it focuses on the four areas that I mentioned above, which were, again, career goals, inventory of career position, professional development needs and goals, and strengths. And if you have a pen handy, I will share a couple of sample questions I use for each of those areas. So in relation to the career goals, some questions that I ask on the worksheet is, where do they envision themselves for their next position? Another question is, what are the competencies or skills they will need to develop or increase to prepare for their next position? For the inventory of their current position, which is the I, questions are, in what ways does your current position tap into your passion? And I also ask, what are you not getting and what do you need? For the P, which is professional development needs, I ask who supports and guides you with your professional development. And I also ask questions about what support or guidance do you need to increase your identified competencies for improvement. And then for the S, I ask them to identify their top 3 strengths. And I also ask, how are these strengths demonstrated in their current position? These are just a few of the questions that I ask just to begin the dive in. I ask each staff member to fill the worksheet out prior to setting up a meeting with each of them to discuss. So how do I empower the SIPs? The coaching strategies that I use is in the how. How you ask the question, the tone you use, how you create a space of trust. An employee will feel like you are invested if they feel heard, and that is really when coaching is used best or works best. If an employee feels heard, then they'll be more open to sharing. You are asking an employee to name what they want, need, to assist them in being successful in their current position, to identify their strengths, career goals, and professional development needs. You're asking them to be the driver in all of this. Your job as a supervisor is to create a space to have honest dialogue, to assist them in meeting their goals, providing coaching, mentoring, pushing them when they need it, creating opportunities for them to grow. This can be done through numerous types of ways, such as in the types of assignments you give them, providing leadership opportunities such as leading department or division initiatives, assigning them to serve on department or university level committees, leading professional development workshops for the staff or team, presenting at regional or national conferences, sending them to competency building trainings / workshops, for example, workshops on public speaking, workshops on managing multiple priorities, Excel trainings, workshops on how to manage programs. As a result, there would be several value adds. The individual feels supported by you, empowered by you. You're tapping into their the things that motivate them. The identified competency is also increased, and they can also add some of these new skill sets to their resume. So it's a resume builder. The initial conversation around SIPs is designed to be a starting point. It must truly go on beyond just the one and done. It's an ongoing conversation. So moving on to the team. Tom, can you move to the next slide, please? When focusing on the team, tapping into the individual strengths of a team member can serve several purposes. When you have a better understanding of your employees' career goals and the required competencies for improvement, you have a better idea of what types of tasks or projects, or even how to challenge your employee. By assigning specific tasks or projects that will directly contribute to building, strengthening those competencies while still meeting your project department needs. So while you understand what they need, you have to pair that with the appropriate task or assignment. So you can grow that competency, but you can also tap into what is motivating them, which also contributes to the overall department needs. This will also motivate your staff because it shows that the supervisor's intentionality and investment in the employee's professional development. I want to quickly refer back to the inventory questions related to the current position, which was the I. The I questions are, again, in what ways does your current position tap into your passion? What are you getting, or what are you not getting, and what do you need? When you ask this allows you to gain insight into what's missing from the current position for the employee and what they find as a demotivator. This is often a supervisor's blind spot because we often do not know until we ask the employee. Once identified, the supervisor can begin to work with the employee to address employees' needs and barriers. These can be developed through training, coaching, teaching them techniques you use, or even inviting other staff members to share their strengths, or share their techniques, Asking the employees to identify their strengths helps you see what drives the employee, what lights them up. I have an employee who absolutely loves processes, loves developing processes. Early on, when I began supervising her, I noticed that she would always be beaming whenever she came into my office to tell me that she had created or fine-tuned a process. I really started to tap into this. And when a position opened up in my office that required acute attention to detail and building processes, I asked her if she would be interested in applying for the position. And she has been in that specific position ever since and never been happier. Had I not been really in tune with what motivates her, what really lights her up, I wouldn't have been able to identify that this position would be the best fit for her. The strengthening of the team. It is critical to how a team functions when each person on the staff is aware how everyone's strengths complement each other. This allows and encourages the staff to rely on each other's strengths by asking for assistance from one another or working together on projects, tasks, or programs. For example, many of my staff members tap into the employee that I just mentioned for proofreading assistance, assistance with Excel, developing processes because they are all aware of her strengths, which allows them to pull her in whenever they need her expertise when they're working on a project. One activity I use to reveal individual strengths within the team is a 360 staff reflection activity, which has a number of questions to intentionally facilitate conversations between staff so they can gain valuable insight into one another's work style, communication style, and strengths. So the activity goes something like this. Staff members meet one-on-one with each other and interview each other. Again, if you have a pen handy, I'd be more than happy to share a couple of the questions that they ask each other. So one of the questions is, what do you see as my strengths? How do you feel I contribute to the team? And who is your go-to person on the staff and why? The feedback I've received from my staff groups that have participated in this activity is that they feel empowered because it allowed them to hear directly from others how they contributed to the team. Because prior to that, they never knew others saw them that way, and they never saw themselves in that light. I've also been told it was a great opportunity to connect to staff members that they wouldn't normally discuss these types of things with. Other team activities or trainings I've used to build on this activity is bringing in somebody to facilitate MBTI, True Colors, Insight training, and a color code training. Taking the time to dive into your employees' SIPs and having them engage each other in conversations around gaining insight into individual strengths and how those strengths complement each other facilitates a stronger team approach to supporting your department and mission goals. This knowledge also strengthens and develops stronger working relationships and builds trust among staff members. This also empowers you as a supervisor because you have a clear understanding of what strength and expertise each staff member brings, so you can effectively assign tasks and projects so they can thrive. So that is what we want. We want to be able to keep moving the staff forward, but we have to be able to tap into what their needs are so we can do that effectively. Which leads us to the topic of delegation. So for now, I will turn it over to Tom.
Thank you. So there's a slight lag when I click next on the slide, so it's coming. I think it has to go through the wires and through the air and reach out to the rest of the world. So the slide is going to advance. But the most critical lesson that we can learn about delegation is that because we have staff that we supervise, that is an inclination, that is a clue that we have to be good at delegating, because the outcomes that we're charged with producing won't occur from our own effort. I think that's the one piece that is often missing in the dialogue around delegation. And one of the best things you can do with your colleagues is to explain what is the big outcome we're going for. Oftentimes when we delegate, we may delegate one part of a greater whole. Well, if you only see that one part, you're going to lose sense of how this fits into a greater whole. What is the greater whole? And I learned this early on, and I learned this from a supervisor who was good at delegating to me and to my peers. The supervisor would always explain how our part, no matter how insignificant it seemed to us, why it mattered in the bigger picture, and how it contributed even to a larger outcome. And so now, with my own staff, when I ask them for data, or I ask them to create something for me, I talk to them about why this is needed. And I take advantage of the times when I can tell them at some point in the future how this particular task or this project they worked on, how that still matters today. One of the ways I often do this is I save most of my emails, not every email. I'm not an email hoarder, but I do save a lot of emails, and I'll pull up an email and I'll send it maybe a year later saying, hey, you remember this thing you did? Here's why it matters. And so beginning with the end in mind gets buy-in, it demonstrates value, and more importantly, it helps staff to see that what they do truly matters. So talking about strategy versus tactics, I often find supervisors spend a lot of time, when they delegate, they spend time talking about tactics. They want to tell the supervisee how to do what the supervisor has delegated. And that's very dangerous, because everyone brings their own style. And what you're looking for isn't a particular pattern or particular set of steps to be accomplished. Generally, you're looking for this big picture to happen. You're looking for this end result to happen. So I find it's far more valuable to focus on strategy and to, for example, if we're traveling somewhere and we need to reach a destination, I'd rather spend time talking about what that destination is and why reaching that destination matters. I'd rather spend time talking about that than spend time talking about which turns we need to make and whether we're going to take the interstate or the side roads. That doesn't matter. Because if you give the boundaries, if you give expectations, if you say, look, we need to reach this destination in this much time safely, without breaking any laws, causing any injury, but how we get there, that's up to you to figure out. We just need to get there, and these are the general boundaries that we have. And part of providing those boundaries is identifying what resources are available. And so sometimes resource is about time, sometimes it's about money, sometimes it's human, but you need to provide the resources as well. One example that's very salient for me right now is a project I've been working on with some of my colleagues. I'm currently serving as the acting vice president for enrollment management, a very short stint. I'm doing it for about 6 months, and I'll go back to being full-time vice president for student affairs. But we've been trying to identify a metro rate. So a metro rate is what you charge folks within a certain geographical region. This is usually a discount compared to your out-of-state tuition. Anyway, I've been working with a couple of folks to do this, and the first thing I did is I said, here's the challenge we're facing. We're having a hard time attracting a certain population to get them to live in our residence halls. Here's one possible strategy that we can employ. Here's some things I need from each of you to explore whether or not this is viable. once I was able to explain the big picture, the magic happened. Because to be honest, the talent to bring about the outcome, which was the analysis of whether or not this could ever work, that talent didn't reside within me. It resided within the folks who I delegated it to. And so the next piece I have here is about empowering others to solve problems. One of the mistakes I see supervisors making, and the mistake that I have made as well, is requiring people to come back to us to solve problems. Reality is most folks have the capacity to solve the problem. They just need to be empowered to do so and to be given a framework. And oftentimes I like to challenge folks to solve the problem, bring back their solution, and then we can debrief whether or not that solution is realistic or possible. And so it's truly a blessing when you tell a staff person, when they ask you, well, how do I solve this? What do I do about this? Well, I'll say, well, I really don't know. Why don't you go take some time, give it some thought, and come back with some ideas, and we can talk about it. And so part of what we're looking to do when we delegate, we want to foster the same leadership capacity in those we supervise as what we have as supervisors ourselves. In some ways, we want to take ourselves out of the mix and spend more time providing big picture support to our staff and not spend so much time on the tactics. One of the ways we do it is during the one-on-one. I would imagine all of us can think back even to maybe our times as undergraduate students or new professionals in the field, how important the one-on-one is. And it still is very important at any point in your career. I never forget when I became a new vice president, and I guess it was probably about a year into the job, and for some reason my one-on-one with my supervisor didn't get scheduled, or I was traveling, she was traveling, and we kind of went 2 weeks without meeting. I was thrilled. She was not thrilled because she said it's important for us to spend time together. So that did two things for me. It made me feel valued because it wasn't like she wanted to micromanage me. She felt that it was important for us to connect, and not just to connect to solve a problem, but even to connect to just talk about our own professional growth, our own professional journey. And I felt like at the time, if a president finds it valuable to spend time with her supervisee, then clearly we all need to value that. So one of the ways we structure our time together is with the one-on-one agenda, and it's something that I've been using for years. And I used to be the one who set the agenda, but then I realized I should not be the one who is establishing the agenda. The agenda needs to come primarily from the supervisee. And so there's a few critical components that should be part of every one-on-one agenda, whether it's a written agenda or simply one that's verbally understood and shared. So number one, you have to ask, how are you? And not just how's the job, not just the function of the job, but ask really, how are you doing? How are things going in your life? It doesn't mean we want to be nosy, but we want to make sure people are doing okay and offer that support. The next question you ask as a supervisor, you need to ask, what do you need from me? What can I do for you? How can I serve you? And if you are supervising individuals who in turn supervise others, you have to ask, how is your staff? And so those are the critical questions that should be part of every one-on-one agenda. If you notice in the pattern, it's about checking in on the people, checking in on how they're doing, knowing about their own stories. And what's surprising is that when I interact with my colleagues and I can ask them questions about how things are going and remember details that are shared, again, these are all details that are appropriately shared. We're not crossing any inappropriate boundaries. It helps them feel valued. It helps them know that they matter. The other piece that we need to consider within the one-on-one framework is that opportunity to give feedback. And not just the constructive feedback, but you want to let people know what they're doing well. Because oftentimes we don't know what we're doing well until someone tells us. Sometimes we just do what we think we should be doing and not knowing that what we're doing may be making a difference. So it's so critical as a supervisor, you spend time being a witness to the work of your staff so you can tell them, hey, that was great. You remember last week when you said this? This was really good. It was really brilliant that you did this. Again, it's about fostering the same capacity in our staff that we want to demonstrate to them. And sometimes we may be fearful that, well, if I'm teaching my staff what I know, that I'm not going to be needed. And that's okay. I guarantee no one's going to lose their job because they've developed very effective, high-performing staff members. Guarantee. Will not happen. The other piece about the one-on-one is a chance for guidance and co-creation. It should be a place where we can experiment. It's a place where we can share ideas, a place where we can create something and then go forth. And so this week, maybe because of this webinar happening, I found myself in a lot of space where we were co-creating together. And the co-creation has been really cool because in this, again, temporary role that I'm in, I'm bridging together two different divisions that are in some ways working together as one. And so I had a chance to meet with the person who oversees all of our auxiliaries and all the money side, and also working with our director of admissions. We've come up with a brilliant idea that we think will help save students money, attract students to our campus, and make a difference in the lives of the people in this region. Again, the brilliance was not my own. The brilliance was the people around me, and that simply came from providing the outcomes we were looking for, providing the big picture, but then having that time together in the one-on-one where we're literally sitting across from each other, having discussions, brainstorming, taking notes. And so it's more than just sitting as if we were in a counseling session. It's also a chance for brainstorming. Sometimes we might get up and write on the dry erase board, but it should be a chance for co-creating and also a chance to provide guidance. And it should be a safe place where your supervisee can bring forth the issue or problem, where you might even do a little bit of role playing. I know we don't talk about role playing anymore as professionals. It's something that we sometimes delegate to just something that students do. But we might role play a difficult scenario, but it needs to be that space. And again, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this general point about the one-on-one, it needs to be dedicated in sacred time. So it should not be a time that you freely cancel. It should not be a time that you simply see as extra time on your calendar. There may be times where you might need to cancel it, but it should be because you have already met previously in the week and you may not need to meet again. Or if you need to cancel today, you really should be trying to schedule that meeting as soon as possible. So in the very beginning, we mentioned this idea that perhaps there are negative employees. We don't want to believe it, and I'm sure we all can think of a time where we may have had a colleague who was negative, and we sometimes, I won't say we, I will own this for myself. I learned a very tough lesson, not years ago, but simply it was months ago, probably about 6 months ago now. I learned the lesson of the impact of a negative employee. And the impact goes beyond just the work of that employee. It's also the impact it has on all the people around that employee, the impact it has when the perception generated by the colleagues is, well, this person is being negative. And sometimes that negativity is not just an attitude, but it's also in behavior. It's also when the person says, well, I'm not going to go to this meeting because I don't feel like it, or, you know what, I really don't like the way we do this, and because of this, I'm choosing to engage in a different set of behaviors contrary to what I should be doing. And so there is an impact because folks may feel less valued if they're witnessing their colleague who's not being positive, who's not taking the right steps. And I don't mean someone who's just having a bad day. So we all may have a bad day. When we say negative employees, we're talking about a pattern of behavior. When we don't address it, others feel devalued, and they feel as if there's no accountability. What I learned quite acutely, and in some ways it was painful to learn about the lost opportunities. See, in the work we do, we rarely get to isolate ourselves in a room, work in front of a laptop all day, and never interact with others. And so we work through our relationships, and when those relationships can't foster, or when those relationships don't happen, opportunities are lost. And dealing with the negative staff person, in my own experience, I found once that staff person was out of the picture, the lost opportunities were found. And it was almost as if it was a barren field with nothing growing, and all of a sudden the rain came, the seeds were planted, and there was just a robust amount of outcomes that happened once that negative employee was moved out of the picture. And so it's important too, when you're dealing with a negative employee, and maybe when an employee who just needs to be heard, figure out what the need. So all human behavior, this is important, this just hit me, a ton of bricks. All human behavior is intended to produce an outcome. So listening to that negative employee and listening to the employees who are affected helps us get at what outcome do we need to seek right now. Sometimes the person being negative may need to find a different role. Maybe same organization, different role. Maybe not be in the same organization. Those who are affected, they have to have their needs met, and you have to listen to understand what is it they're looking for. Maybe they just want to be affirmed that what they're witnessing is something that is actually negative, and they may need you just to acknowledge it and say, I understand your concerns, and I'm working through it, and I want you to know that I appreciate your concerns. Whenever these situations get serious, it's important that you work with your human resources department. So as when I watch these talk shows, when you have someone like Dr. Oz says, yes, I'm a doctor, but you need to see your own doctor. So in this case, while we're talking about things that could end up being serious human resource concerns, you need to talk to your HR department. But if the behavior you're witnessing is severe enough that it could lead to separating the person from the institution, you need to be documenting what you're witnessing, and you need to document the impact of what you are witnessing and the impact on the environment. And you should also be working with your own supervisor in this. And so I can't stress enough how important it is that you deal with negativity, because in our experiences, generally people want to be positive. And when there isn't the opportunity to be positive because you're dealing with a negative person, it makes other people feel less invested in wanting to demonstrate their best self. So as we are beginning to wind down, I want to just spend a little bit of time about inclusive leadership. And so anything that you are looking to do within your organization, within your role, while you may spark the initial thought, it doesn't go very far unless there is a shared vision. And so I often use the analogy that I may bring out one ingredient, or I may bring out one entree, but the entire meal comes together when we all can contribute our own different piece. I'm talking about food because I skipped lunch, so you have to forgive me. I'm focused though, so we're good. But the shared vision is when everyone gets to contribute their part of the meal. Some person might bring the salad because they really love salads. If I'm part of the meal, I might bring the main entree. I love to grill, so I might bring some grilled vegetables that are seasoned just right. But you have to have that shared vision, and it needs to happen through dialogue. And so part of it is seeking input. I think the one mistake that I see mid-level and higher folks make is they don't engage their students when they're looking for feedback and looking for insight. And understanding how, for example, graduate assistants play a role. And so however you come together as a staff, whether you have regular weekly meetings with your staff, whether your division has regular meetings, it's important that as you go about creating the outcomes within your area, that you're getting feedback, you're seeking input, and you're creating ways to give feedback regularly. And once you get that input, that's what you can delegate. So you know what? If you really want to see this happen, I really want to see it happen too. I want to support what you're doing. I really need your help. Would you mind taking on this particular component? And if you're willing to take this on, I will support you, and I'll even make some resources available for you. When you're willing to do that, you'd be amazed to see what happens. I can tell you in my own experience, I've been blessed to work with students who are very serious about diversity and serious about educating both themselves and others. And we've been very fortunate in the past few years to invite 3 ambassadors to our campus. We have the ambassador from the Ivory Coast, the ambassador from Mali, and the ambassador from, oh God, I can't think of the last place. I'll have to look it up. That person just came here. The bottom line is it happened because there were a group of students, a group of staff, and some faculty who were very serious about doing this. And when they heard that the institution was looking for ways to both be more pluralistic and be more inclusive and expose the campus to a different level of engagement, they took that charge to heart. And with minimal direction, only having the vision, but also knowing they had our support, they did amazing things. And that's why two-way communication is important. And that ties back into the one-on-one time, to whatever meeting schedule you follow within the different levels of your organizations. But you should always be reporting back out. You should always be going back out, sharing what's going on, and asking for feedback, and taking the feedback, and then talking about how you've used the feedback. And so with that, we're going to transition to questions.
Well, I wanted to just follow up on something that you said about the negative employees.
Yes.
I think it's really important to, as soon as the behavior switches into, if you want to use the word negative, to alert either HR or your, I will go directly to HR, but your protocol might require you to go straight to your manager. But to start having those discussions and start documenting it right away. So there might be a template, or you might just use a Word. Do it in Word, but to start documenting the behavior right away, because oftentimes as it escalates, human resources might ask you, have you been documenting this? Have you documented the behavior? Have you documented how you've addressed the behavior? You want to be able to have that trail, if you will, and be able to have it down on paper, so it's you don't have to try to recall it or start from the moment that they tell you to start document it, because it's best as soon as you see it just to do it right away. And I've learned this along the way of thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to have this conversation with a staff member and it's going to be okay. And then it just keeps showing up, and then I go to my staff, my manager or HR a couple weeks later, and they're like, did you document it? Have you been documenting it? So my lesson in that is start documenting it as soon as you start to see it.
That's a great point, Deb. And part of that documentation can show up in the annual performance evaluation. And so the performance evaluation should be telling a story of what happened over the past year. And so it is intended to review. In the truest sense, it should be a review. And so if there are things that have happened over the past year, particularly things that are a pattern, not just a one-time occurrence, something that happened on a random Tuesday morning for about 3 minutes. I'm talking about things that are a pattern. If they're not showing up in the evaluation, you have failed to document what's going on, because the evaluation should tell a story of what's been happening over the past year. Should be a synopsis of what's been happening over the past year. So we want to jump into some questions, and the first question that has come up is how do you factor staff work ethic into appropriately delegating tasks? Deb, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I could. I'm not sure I completely understand it, but if I'm looking at the my staff's work ethic, I guess for me, I have to. I look at the staff's work ethic, but I also know what the task I'm giving them and where they would need coaching. So if I'm really aware, because I've done my dive in to find out where the barriers are, where their strengths are, where the things they do really well, and also who they would need help with, or who can help them with the project, I kind of sat down with my staff to not just assign it, but to walk them through how they could best execute the task. So I've gone from just giving a task. I like to walk my staff through it. So I give Tom something. Tom, how are you going to do this? Who can you pull in to help you do this? Where do you think you would get stuck? So I'm asking those questions, so I'm not leaving, just giving the staff the task. They go into their office, they sit there, they spin because they're like, oh God, how am I going to do this? I don't have all the things that I need to do this because I'm not strong in this one competency. I don't want to do that anymore. I used to do that, and then I realized, there's something happening sometimes when I give tasks. They just sit in their room or their office, spin, and then I ask them how they're doing, and we've got no movement. So I want to be able to set them up for success, and for me is knowing them well, knowing their strengths, knowing that they know the other staff's strengths, and asking them who they can pull into this. Because at the end of the day, I want them to be successful. I want the task to be successful because it mostly impacts the students, and I want that to be successful. So that's how I would address it.
I would simply add that we all enter this thing called work with a different level of work ethic. Sometimes if we want to help folks grow, we might give them a task that may require them to stretch a little bit. But again, we set the boundaries, we identify the outcome we're looking for. We don't always need to explain the path they have to follow. I find that too. I look at their strengths, and I respect what I know is their strength. I'm not always looking to have them take on a whole set of competencies. So someone who simply does not embrace being artistic, they're not the person who's going to draw and create, but if you give them an Excel spreadsheet, they can really dig into that, then that's okay. We do have a question about using strengths quests. So,
yeah. So I a few years ago, the University San Jose State, we used strength quests as a university quite heavily. We've moved on to insights. So strengths quest is really good. Another thing that I've used. My staff have taken a lot of different things, like I listed them before, MBTI, True Colors. They tend to love strengths quests. They tend to love insights the best. And it's simply, you can find it, it's insights.com. They just find it more valuable. I guess it's not just a printout of what your strengths are, but also goes a little bit deeper into team dynamics and who has certain strengths on the team and how those can work with each other. So it takes, I think that's why they liked it a little bit more than Strengths Quest.
Other questions?
I think, Tom, I have a question. You had talked about this negative employee and how it has really impacted you. How have you moved on? So I know your job is to help the staff, and you talked about, the sun coming out and everything was like great, but how were you able to move on from that experience as a supervisor yourself and bring your energy back to the staff?
Well, one, and this was not rehearsed, folks. So one, you got to have colleagues you can trust. So I remember going to Deb, and Deb and I have known each other for over 14 years, and I remember going to her and just talking about how difficult this situation was. It was pretty difficult, and having that perspective and being affirmed that what I experienced happened, and it wasn't something that was anyone's fault per se. It just kind of happened. That was helpful, and then taking the time and actually meeting with a lot of colleagues to help repair some of that damage, and then finding the support. Folks who wanted to develop those opportunities were now given the opportunity to develop the opportunity, right? The doors were open, and that made a difference, and that was very much affirming. And so, you know, it's tough too when you have a situation that's happening and it's not being addressed, right? So in this case, I was able to address it. The question is, how can you support someone when it's not being addressed by a supervisor, when that negative person is not being addressed? And sometimes it's about reaffirming the person who's witnessing it and helping them not lose hope that, one, it will be addressed, and if it won't be addressed anytime, helping them still be motivated and be committed to the work they do.
So there's a couple questions. How do you deal with a coworker who is a negative employee, that they do not supervise, but they have a negative impact on a person I directly supervise?
Yeah, you know, I think this is the case where you as a supervisor need to go to the supervisor of the negative supervisee. Hope you follow that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes as a supervisor, I may not be aware of my negative supervisee. In fact, this happened to me. I wasn't aware of it. It took another supervisor to come to me for me to learn that there was an issue. And it was the beginning of finally addressing the issue. And so maybe one of the best you can do for your colleague is to go to your colleague and say, I need to tell you some things I've been witnessing from your supervisee. And to be okay doing that, because you want to name what you witnessed and name what you have heard firsthand. So if your supervisor, the person you're working with, has had negative experience with the other person, if you're hearing that from someone you supervise, it's okay then to go to your other colleague to say, hey, your staff person, here's what's going on, and here's what my staff is saying.
And how do you support that? How do you support your supervisor, the person you're supervising that's going through this?
One, I remind them that what they've witnessed isn't what we want within the organization. And even if, you know, these individuals or the individual who's being negative is not part of my unit, and I've had to do this. I said, look, I'm sorry this is happening, and I want you to know that I want to do my best to address it and affirm them that what they are experiencing is not something that should be happening, is not something that they have caused. I would remind them of the good work they're doing. I would even strategize on ways they might be able to work around this person while the issue is being addressed. But I do think, and I'm going to challenge folks a bit, even when the negative stuff happens outside of our units, if we have sometimes we have the organizational authority to just speak up and say something. Even if we don't feel we have that authority, we need to make sure we report that up to say, here's the impact this person is happening, particularly if that person is having an impact. If we're not just talking about the person who didn't smile today, the person who's had a behavioral pattern of negativity, you have to address that behavioral pattern. So sometimes it's important to document that pattern of behavior and then share it and rely on your supervisors to help do that. but support that supervisee and helping them understand that you want to work with them, you want to support them, and you're going to share appropriately, and as long as they're okay with it, you're going to share what you've been told.
So another question, we only have like 2 minutes, but I want to just cover these last two. Another question, in a newly formed unit with several personnel changes, what would be the best way to begin to create a cohesive unit? For me, and I've done this, is, and probably why I have developed the SIPs or professional development, I need to figure out who all my players are first, what they bring, how they want to contribute to this new unit, and then, again, it's not just the one and done, and then building on that, it could be strengths quest, it could be MBTI, it could be anything that your HR offers in terms of professional development. As a staff, you really want to be able to put as much time into building that solid foundation before you move forward, because you just don't become a team just because they put a new unit together. So that foundation piece is really important. And if you want to email me or call me, I'd love to talk to you about that further. And then finally, Tom, you're going to have to be really brief. How do you supervise differently from professional staff that have motivation to move up versus staff who are content and happy in their current role until they retire?
One, we didn't talk about this, but I think it's important that you still set goals with all staff every year and be clear about where they see themselves in the future. And if they are happy in their status and don't want to move up, that's totally fine. There's still opportunities to grow where they are. And so part of that supervision process and part of the evaluation process, whether it is mandated by your HR department or if you require this, they got to outline goals of what they want to achieve. And it needs to be part of the regular dialogue. And I would even say setting goals and revisiting goals should be part of the one-on-one meeting.
And for me, I would really look at what motivates them. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. This has been great. And I will answer as well. If you want to email me or direct message me on Twitter, however you contact me, I'd be more than willing to answer any additional questions.
Thank you both so much. I got quite a lot out of this webinar, and I hope our audience members did as well. We're leaving the last slide on the screen so that attendees can write down the email addresses, because I believe both Deborah and Tom are going to be great resources for many of us in the future. I would like to let all of you know that the mid-level community of practice is available for all of you as ACPA members, and we are striving and working very hard to get more webinars like this going in the future, as well as other opportunities to connect with mid-level practitioners. And one of the bigger ones is at the annual convention in Montreal this year. Our open meeting is on Tuesday, March 8th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. and the room will be put into the convention schedule. So please check that out. We're also doing a live mid-level panel on Monday, March 7th with a variety of colleagues from across the country, different types of institutions and experiences. And we would love for you to join us with that. Please continue the conversation we had today on Twitter and Facebook. I do have some of the questions that Deborah mentioned typed up, and I will be able to post those on Facebook. And Deborah also said that she'd be happy to make that inventory and questions available on her website. So maybe I hope I'm not saying too much, Deborah and Tom, when I say that our audience members can do that.
Yeah, it's currently with the with graphic designer, so it should be up there in probably the next 2 weeks, and you can just pull it out for free and use it. Great.
Thank you so much. The last little tidbit and announcement I have is that there are going to be 3 webinars offered through a joint effort of the Mid-Level Community of Practice and Community Colleges of California, and those are taking place on Friday, February 26th. We have put the information on the Mid-Level Community of Practice Facebook page, and I just very quickly want to tell you the titles. The impact on free community colleges is 1. Environment stressors for mid-levels is 2. And the third is promoting wellness among student affairs professionals in higher education. So we hope you take advantage of those free webinars next week. And thank you once again to our presenters and all of our audience members. We hope you enjoyed it. See you at the convention.
Thank you.